Welcome to the first of the two-part series on circles. So this is much shorter than the last ones on finding the angles. We're going to be talking about circles. The first thing we really need to focus on is some vocabulary so you know what we're all talking about. And by all, I mean all your math teachers and everybody else who's talked to you about circles. Now obviously here's our circle, but we're going to go with a textbook definition. Okay, a circle is actually all the points that are equidistant from the center. So we have our center there, and I know that might be a little hard to see. Let's make that a little bit bigger. That center, all the points that are around that center, they're all the same distance away. If you took a ruler and measured them, and if you've ever used a compass in elementary school, you jammed it into the paper and then you spun it around, because that created that every spot is the same distance from that place where you stuck it into the paper in the first place. But that's the center. So we have our center, and we have we have all the spaces around the outside. Okay? So by definition, a circle is all of the points equidistant from the center. Okay? So that's what creates our circle here. Now we're going to talk, we have a couple of pieces to the circle we want to talk about. The first one is if we go from the center to the edge, this right here is called the radius. Now you're going to hear a lot of words that are going to sound weird to you because they come from Greece, and Greece from thousands of years ago. These are all words that we came up with, the ancient Greeks came up with 2,000 years ago, 2,200 years ago, and we in America, we're terrible about this. We don't rename things. We just go, what do you call it? And when they tell us, we call that the radius, we go, then we're going to call it the radius as well. So the radius is the distance from the center to any edge, because they're all the same. Now, if we were to if we go through from one side all the way to the other, this side, that's called the diameter. That's this distance from one side to the other. But you have to go through the center, not through here. That's something else you'll deal with in a slightly more advanced setting, maybe when you're in third or fourth year of high school. This is more of our level. But that's called the diameter. Okay? And I'm gonna throw a little equation at you, which is that the diameter is equal to the radius times 2. It's 2 radiuses. As you saw, even when I drew it, right? I drew up from the center, then I drew down from the center. That's the diameter. It was the radius twice. And you might even see it, or you could see it this way, that the radius is the diameter divided by 2. Depends on how you want to use it, okay? But the more you know about these things, the more you see these formulas, the more you feel comfortable using them, the easier they will be to maneuver through and utilize in more and more complicated formulas as you get into more and more complicated math. Okay, and there's a lot to go with circles. Obviously, right, you can't go anywhere without seeing circles, right? Wheels, steering wheels, car wheels, bicycle wheels, they're all circles, and they're so important. Okay, they're just so much a part of everything. Wheels, cogs, all kinds of things have to do with that. Okay, we have the next and then the last measurement we're going to talk about with the circle is the distance around the outside. If we were to go all the way around the outside, that's something called the circumference. And again, this is another word we just stole straight from the Greeks. And I think the easiest is to call it the perimeter of a circle. Now, perimeter, we remember back, perimeter is just the outside, okay? Distance around the outside of an object. And we always use perimeter specifically for things with sides. And then we have this whole different word for when we talk about circles, which is called circumference. Always seemed to me to be very unnecessary, but since other teachers are going to use it and other people are going to use it, you should know what we're talking about, okay? Because as much as I think it's an unnecessary word because it doesn't add anything other than circumference means circle, it's just the perimeter around the outside. So circle, circumference. When you see prisms later, we'll talk about prisms and perimeter. But It's just the distance around the outside. But now that what's important there is now we have a formula for this. And this is something that we're going to need to know. The circumference of a circle is pi times the diameter of the circle. Now this is something that the ancient Greeks figured out, millions of, 2,000 to 2,200 years ago. They figured this out, and you'll see, sometimes you'll see the formula written this way, that it's 2 times pi times the radius. Now as you notice, remember 2 radiuses is a diameter. These are really the same formula, just it depends on which piece of information that you are given. If they say, hey, I have a circle here with a radius of this, then you'll use this formula. If they say, hey, I have a circle with a diameter of this, you'd use this formula. It's the same formula, it's just which number are you being given determines which one you're going to want to use. And that's really where we're going with this. Okay, but this is a really important formula. Okay, again, what's amazing about this is, again, 2,200 years ago, the Greeks said, hey, you made a circle, that's great. But how do we know it's a circle? What is it about that circle, that little circle that you just have, and that big circle that he's got, and that huge circle that he's got? What is it about them that all means that they're circles? And what they found is that if you take the distance around the outside, which they could physically measure, and then you divided it by the distance across the middle through the center, which again they could physically measure, you kept getting this crazy value pi. Okay, pi, P-I, it's a Greek letter, that's all it is. Okay, and I know you've seen this, that pi is 3.14159. And for the most part, we always just simplify that down to 3.14. But you know what? I don't even bother with that, because if you really are going to use pi in an equation or in where you're actually going to solve something, you're going to be using a calculator. And in your calculator, there's a button. You just push that button and you get pi. And it's as much of it as it can be, since this is what's called a non-terminating, non-repeating decimal, meaning it goes on forever, it never repeats itself, it's never the same, and you can't just, you have to know what the next number is. And I never liked using 3.14. The reason I don't like using it is because you're shrinking the value. It's obviously, it keeps going and it's got more values. And when you make it 3.14, you've rounded it. Now, granted, if you really want to be sure, 3.1416 is a pretty good rounding. However, if you're going to be exact, if you really want to, launch something into space, you need to be sure that you're not rounding off so much that you miss a planet, for example. I know it sounds crazy, but there's something to that. So I always like to use pi in the answer because it's valid. And it just saves us all time. I'm sure you don't want to sit around multiplying by 3.14. You don't want to sit around having to use an extra, going to learn how your calculator works with pi, when you could just give me an answer like, hey, the answer is 6 pi. I like that answer a whole lot better than whatever 6 times 3.14 would work out to be. So I'll give you one simple example here, and that is, we then have one more formula that we desperately need. I forgot before we get too far ahead of ourselves. Circumference, that's the distance around the outside. How about the area on the inside? So what's the area of a circle? Now sometimes I've seen them write it where they write area and then in like little letters down below it they write circle. I've also seen them write A and then weirdly it looks like a little O, but it's actually supposed to be area of a circle. Sometimes they do that. And again, this is so that when someone else is showing you something, you're not going, what does that all mean? You go, no, I already know what that means, keep going. So area of a circle is, again, it's pi, our 3.14159, times the radius, halfway, from the center to the edge, squared. Remember, area is always squared. Okay, it's always got square units, even though it's a circle. Seems strange to say squared. We have a circle, we have a round object, and our units are going to be squared. But that's the way area works. Whenever you're finding an area of something, you're always going to be finding it in this setting. So the last little bit here, I might say find area and circumference of a circle with a, and now here's where it really kicks in. Do I have the diameter? Do I have the radius? What value am I going to be presented with? I'm going to make it easy on myself, and I'm going to give myself the radius. A radius of, let's just make it easy. How about 4 inches? Okay. I don't know what this is. I didn't bother to measure it. So whether the radius, if that's 4 inches, that's a pretty good estimate. I don't know, the length of one pen. But now I have all I need. That's the wonderful thing about all the formulas involving circles, is that you only really need one number. If you know the radius, you can find the circumference. You can find the area. Later on, when we get into spheres, you'll be able to find the volume. All you need is the radius. And when we get into cylinders, and we will talk a little bit about that, that's a different unit. But when you start dealing with cylinders, again, what do you need? You'll need the radius. So here we go. So first we're going to find the circumference. It's 2 times pi times 4. These are all, remember, numbers next to symbols and numbers next to letters mean multiply. So this is just simple multiplication. And here's what I'm talking about. I'm not going to multiply by 3.14. I'm going to multiply 2 times 4, and I'm going to tell you that the circumference is 8 pi. Now, if you have a calculator and you have some uncontrollable desire to multiply it out, you can do that. I really don't need you to. It's not important to me. In fact, this is exactly the right answer. And if you multiply by 3.14, now you're estimating. That's why that equal sign's a little squiggly, because it's not exact anymore. It's an estimate. It's a rounding. It's close, but it's not exact. It's not going to be as good as it could be. And now we've got the circumference, so we know the distance around the outside of the circle. Now let's go to the next part, which is to find the area of it. Well, that's a nice, easy formula. There's that pi again. And my radius, 4, is being squared. Okay, I didn't put the units there. I probably should have. Let me throw those units on. Okay, and again, a number next to a symbol means to multiply, but order of operations tells me to do the exponent first. So 4 squared would be 16. Then I would put this symbol pi, because it's 16 times 3.14. So I don't really want to write it. I don't want to sit around and multiply and get 50.24. But why? This is a better answer. And then at the end, you'd put the units, inches, and just like I said, they're always going to be to the second power, because area is always going to be in square units, even though we're dealing with a circle. So this is really what you need. You need to know these formulas, and you will be expected in every class you take from here until you stop taking math classes. You will be expected to know what the area of a circle is. You will be expected to know what the circumference of a circle is, the formulas for them, and how to calculate them. Okay, and there may be some situation where you use this. Who knows? Okay, but every teacher you have from now until you stop going to school will assume that you know these two formulas, because they're that common and they're that important, because they only really require one value. Give me the radius, I can find you the area, and I can find you the circumference. Okay, I hope this helps with your homework, and again, if you need help, come to the office hours or email me and we'll talk.